Welcome, explorer of the unknown. If you're here, it's because you believe the truth rarely lies on the surface. Here, we investigate what has been denied, buried, or forgotten. Get ready for another account that was never meant to come to light. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any revelations. Now, settle in. Take a deep breath. So sit down, turn off the lights. And most importantly, don't stop listening halfway through. What you're about to hear may seem impossible, but for the one who lived it, it was just another ordinary night, until it wasn't. My name is Tommy Kowalski, former U.S. Air Force Technical Sergeant, serial number 14996B. I served 12 years, most of them posted to forward operating bases with low-visibility surveillance systems and infrasonic detection tech, gear designed to monitor what eyes couldn't see and ears weren't trained to hear. After an incident in 2018, involving the unexplained loss of a recon unit near the Tangi Valley, I was medically discharged. Officially, it was due to stress-related cognitive anomalies. Unofficially, I'd seen something that didn't fit the field report, and the brass didn't like unexplained variables. After cycling through a string of low-clearance civilian contracts, I landed at the Kellerman facility in West Texas, just outside El Paso. The job was pitched as simple: overnight shift security, one-man post, no civilian access, no live feeds. It was an archival warehouse, supposedly nothing more than a cold storage building for defunct NASA media. Old reels, magnetic tapes, telemetry printouts. The place had been mothballed since the late 90s and was barely on any official registry. My shifts were 12 hours long, starting at 6 p.m., and my only responsibilities were to walk 3 rounds, log temperature and humidity levels, and report if I saw a rodent. They even told me the coffee was free. The first 2 weeks were uneventful. Dust, silence, analog systems that clicked and groaned. Like old bones, terminals still ran on Unix. Most of the electrical work was patched together with post-Cold War parts, and I only ever used half the lights in the building. The place felt dead, and honestly, I liked it that way. Then, on the 12th night, I noticed something strange behind Terminal 3B. It was taped there, crudely, like someone had done it in a hurry. A manila envelope, yellowed with age. Written on it, in thick, black permanent marker, Kowalski. No rank, no title, just my name. No one else was supposed to know I was stationed here. There was no rotation schedule. I was the only human presence logged on site for the month. I peeled the tape off and slid the envelope open. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper, stiff like it had been handled too many times. It contained 2 lines, written in all caps: "Never look twice." And beneath that, a chart, hand-drawn, showing time-stamped intervals, infrared sensor anomalies, humidity drops, and handwritten notations. Voices after Zo3 Osasu. Do not engage the screen if static persists, 11cc, and circled in red ink. Do not enter room 7 under any circumstances. I stood there for a long time, gripping the note. It felt absurd, like a bad initiation prank from a technician with too much time on his hands. But the handwriting felt deliberate, tight, controlled, exact, military. There were smudges of oil on the bottom right corner, fingerprints maybe, and a faint chemical scent that reminded me of ammonium. Nitrate, like demo compound residue. I looked around. The hallway was empty, dead quiet, but something shifted in the air. A pressure, the kind you feel before a thunderclap, except there was no storm, just the low mechanical hum of a dying building pretending it was still useful. I turned the paper over. On the back, barely visible in pencil, were the initials DM. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last night I would think of the Kellerman facility as just a forgotten NASA storage unit. Something had been waiting for me, watching, and now it knew I had seen the message. At 3:13 a.m., that same night, the facility changed. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way. There were no alarms, no lights flickering in a horror movie rhythm. It was subtle, surgical. It started with the radio, a Motorola UHF model clipped to my chest. I kept it on channel 3 out of habit, even though I was the only assigned operator within a 20-mile radius. The radio crackled once, just once. A short, clipped distortion, like someone trying to speak through a mouthful of water. Then it went silent again. I stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering over the squelch button, but something told me not to respond. That's when I heard the voice. Not from the radio, from the corridor. It came from behind the sealed door of room 7. The The voice was slow, low, strained, like a recording slowed down just enough to sound human but not quite right. "Tommy, are you still there?" It wasn't the acoustics of the building. It wasn't feedback. It was directionally present. The kind of sound that moves through the walls and into your spine. The temperature in the hallway dropped instantly, by almost 6 degrees Celsius according to the old wall-mounted sensor. I could feel it in my lungs. The kind of cold that vibrates behind your teeth. Room 7 had been off-limits since before I was even stationed there. Marked non-operational. The door had no digital lock, just a mechanical override plate that looked like it hadn't been turned in years. I'd passed it a dozen times without thinking about it. But now, standing there with that voice still echoing in my skull, I knew that someone, something, was behind it. Or maybe not behind, maybe through it. The blueprints showed room 7 as a dead end. 4 walls, reinforced, no additional passages. But when I pulled up the environmental log on my terminal, I found a discrepancy. A thermal gradient leading away from the room into the wall itself. Like heat. Living. Heat was radiating from inside and moving horizontally. That's not possible. There were no ducts, no wiring pathways, nothing but poured concrete and rebar. I rechecked the footage from Corridor Cam C12. Nothing. Or rather, 17 seconds of nothing. A blank frame. The camera went dark precisely at 3:13 a.m., the exact moment I heard the voice. When the feed returned, the hallway looked the same, except for one thing. A long, narrow shadow cast under the door. It wasn't there before. It wasn't mine. And it didn't move. I went back to the central terminal, locked the hatch behind me, and pulled the archive records on David Martinez. The name on the envelope: Smithsonian Restoration Specialist. Loaned to NASA for a 6-week archival cleanup and digitization run. Last entry log dated February 18th. No exit timestamp. His equipment had been signed in. Never signed out. I accessed internal memos and found an incident report. Sealed, red-flagged, not for external viewing. It mentioned an anomalous reaction during media exposure, followed by sudden neurological distress. Martinez reportedly locked himself in room 7 for over 4 hours before being removed by internal response. No further notes. No follow-up. Just one word, stamped in black at the bottom of the report. Reassigned. But no destination. No forwarding contact. It was like he had been absorbed into the building and quietly erased. And now, I was hearing his voice. Not in memory. Not in guilt. In real time. I needed to know what had happened inside room 7. I needed to understand what Martinez had seen that made him lock himself in, disappear from the system, and somehow still speak through a sealed door weeks later. I knew the moment I opened that door, if I ever chose to, something irreversible would happen. But I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. So instead, I went after the data. I disconnected the main system from the backup servers to avoid triggering any automated remote reporting. Then I accessed the maintenance logs from the optical scanning array. Hidden in one of the maintenance subfolders, filed under an innocuous name, RS-03 Video Drift Corrections, was a sequence of raw frame captures, each labeled by hand, not machine. The images were time-stamped with dates from the late 1960s and early 70s. At first, I thought it was old lunar footage. Dust, black sky, the occasional shadow of a boot. But when I adjusted the contrast and corrected the frame rate anomalies, I began to see things that didn't make sense. One of the sequences showed the surface of the moon from a chest-mounted camera, probably Armstrong's EVA feed. In the distance, along the rim of a crater, something moved. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't one of the astronauts. It was too tall, too still. In one frame, it appeared like a vertical column with appendages, unmoving. In the next, it was gone. But in the same shot, a faint outline, like a heat signature, remained in the dust. Not the kind of imprint a human boot leaves, but something more like radiation exposure. An echo of presence. Another set of frames showed a different anomaly. Static shadows that remained fixed even when the source of light changed angles. Impossible on a surface with no atmosphere. It was like the shadows were embedded in the terrain, not projected by it. The strangest part came in a file simply labeled Red Alpha Cut. It wasn't part of the main footage logs. It looked like someone had pulled this segment out manually, keeping it separate. The clip lasted only 31 seconds. It began with a static shot of the lunar horizon. Then a voice, not from mission control but something else, cut through the audio track, speaking in distorted English. The moon is not empty. It never was. The modulation was off. Too mechanical to be natural. Too fluid to be artificial. It didn't sound like a broadcast. It sounded like a mimicry. The final frame of the clip froze on an image of what looked like an astronaut, except the suit was black, featureless, and lacked any mission insignia or life support equipment. The helmet visor reflected not the lander, not Earth, but a structure, curved, smooth, iridescent, towering over the crater's edge. I paused the video, zoomed in, and there, faintly visible in the curvature of the structure's surface, was the camera lens itself. The thing had seen whoever filmed it, not passively, deliberately. I stared at that frame for almost 5 minutes, unable to move. My palms were sweating. My left hand began to tingle, a deep nerve-level sensation, like I had been holding onto an electrical fence without realizing it. The radio, silent for hours, clicked once more. No voice. Just 3 distinct tones. Low, low, high, almost melodic. I recognized the pattern immediately. It matched a signal we used in the field to denote encrypted contact acknowledgement. But I hadn't sent anything. The building had. Somehow, the Kellerman facility was listening. Or worse, it was answering. I shut down the playback system and pulled the external drive. Whatever this was, it had crossed the line between documentation and interaction. That frame, of the black-suited figure with no insignia, and that towering structure reflecting the lens, wasn't just evidence. It was a signal, a moment in which the subject of the footage recognized the observer. That made this more than an archive. It was a conversation. And I had just replied by watching. I placed the drive into an RF-shielded pouch and powered. Down the terminal, cutting off all data flow. But the feeling didn't go away. It was as if something had tethered itself to my awareness. Like I'd opened a door and forgotten to close it behind me. As I moved through the hallway back toward the central security hub, the building's hum changed. The usual groans of settling metal and HVAC feedback were gone, replaced by an intermittent clicking. It echoed faintly, like someone walking in a room 2 corridors over, barefoot, methodical, deliberate. I stopped, held my breath. The clicking stopped too. I resumed. It resumed. I tested it 4 times. It mimicked me every time. Only the direction never changed. It was always behind me. Never closer. Never farther. When I reached the security hub, I tried to lock myself in. The keypad failed on first input, something that had never happened before. I ran a local diagnostic. No malfunctions. I tried again. This time it worked, but the delay didn't make sense unless something had interfered with the signal relay. I shut off the corridor cameras and rerouted power to the auxiliary thermal imaging system, giving me a real-time feed of temperature gradients through the walls and floors. What I saw made my blood run cold. A heat bloom was forming beneath room 7. Not above it, not inside. Beneath. As if something was warming the substructure. Layers of concrete that were supposed to be inert. The bloom was symmetrical, 6-pointed, and pulsing at consistent intervals. Every 11.3 seconds, I watched as the signal intensified, spreading slowly outward into the support beams of the facility, like the entire architecture was being used as a transmission lattice. The Kellerman facility was no longer just a building. It was becoming something else. A relay station, a nervous system, and I was inside it. Out of instinct, or maybe desperation, I opened David Martinez's personnel file again, scanning for anything I might have missed. Buried deep in a file directory labeled Data Log. Extranet was a personal note, likely never meant for anyone to see. It was titled, If Found, written in plain text, dated 3 days before his disappearance. It read, "They don't destroy, they assimilate. It's not invasion, it's invitation. You'll feel it first in your sleep. Your thoughts won't be yours. Then your hearing will change. Patterns will become familiar. You'll start understanding things that were never taught to you. Don't resist. Resistance is noise, and they don't like noise. They've waited long enough. That was it. No signature, no sign-off. Just the slow unraveling of a man who had come too close to something vast and unknowable and couldn't look away. I stared at the message for a long time, the glow of the monitor painting the room in pale blue, and then the power dropped. Not just flickered, dropped. Everything went dark except for the monitor, which should have gone dark too, given the power configuration. But it remained on, even as the rest of the room drowned, in silence. The cursor blinked twice, Then a message appeared on screen, auto-typed without input. You heard us. The terminal fans began to spin faster, loud, like they were trying to keep something from burning through. I stepped back, heart hammering in my throat, the weight of that single phrase sinking in like a stone. Not you saw us. Not you found us. You heard us. They weren't watching me. They were speaking. And now they knew I was listening. I don't remember sitting down, but I found myself in the chair, staring at the screen long after the words disappeared. The terminal had gone black, completely dead. No input response, no cursor, no hum. The silence was so absolute it felt staged, as if the building itself was holding its breath. I glanced at the analog clock above the door, 4:06 a.m. That meant nearly an hour had passed since I saw the last frame of that video. I had no memory of those minutes. None. I checked the CCTV logs from the hub's internal camera, feeds that weren't connected to the external grid. They showed me sitting motionless, eyes open, not blinking, not moving. 47 minutes of stillness. Except for one thing. At the 29-minute mark, the lights flickered briefly, and a shadow crossed the far wall. Not mine. It moved independently, like something standing just outside the room had leaned in and studied me. Then pulled back. I scrubbed the footage frame by frame. The moment the shadow crossed the wall, a faint distortion appeared at the top right corner of the video feed. Not static. Something closer to lens warp, like the feed had curved slightly inward, like a gravity lens effect, but digital. Something was interfering with the signal, but not through signal loss, through presence. Panic started to set in. The kind that grows slow, methodical, informed. I've seen what it looks like when soldiers break. This wasn't that. This was something colder, like a realization creeping in, unavoidable. I wasn't being watched. I was being processed. I remembered what David had written. Patterns will become familiar. You'll start understanding things that were never taught to you. That line had felt metaphorical when I read it. But now, I opened a text editor on a different terminal, one that was offline and unlinked. I just started typing, hoping to focus my thoughts. But what came out wasn't mine. My fingers moved on their own. Not violently, not as if I was possessed. More like guided. The sentences appeared in bursts. Structured, formal. No typos, no second guessing. The words on screen read, "You are one. The signal is clear. Integration has begun." I stopped typing, disconnected the keyboard. Tried again with voice to text using a local mic. Same result. The system responded with the same phrase, over and over, each time I asked a question, no matter how I phrased it. Then I asked, "Where is David?" This time the response was different. Ahead. I didn't understand what that meant at first. Ahead in the, timeline? Ahead in the building? Ahead in thought? I pulled up the old Kellerman floor plan again, scanned it for any areas I hadn't accessed. There was a blocked access tunnel under room 7, sealed since 1973. It wasn't on the electronic schematic. Only the physical blueprint showed it, scratched in pencil, possibly by hand. Marked Storage Extension B, but with a note beside it. Retired. Signal locked. Whatever signal locked meant, it didn't sound like it referred to physical security. More like encryption or suppression. I stared at that tunnel entrance for what felt like hours. Then I got up, retrieved my flashlight, and headed back down the corridor. The clicking sound returned as I walked, synced with my steps again. But now it was slightly ahead of me, not behind. As if whatever had been trailing me had reversed roles, leading me, drawing me. The hallway lights dimmed with each step. The closer I got to room 7, the more the air changed. Thicker, charged, like walking through an ion field. My skin tingled. My eardrums felt pressurized. I reached the door. The blue light was gone now, replaced by a dull orange glow leaking from the floor seams, pulsing every few seconds, like breath or heartbeats. I placed my hand on the manual override wheel. The metal was warm, not electrically, biologically. And behind that door, something waited. Not hostile, not welcoming, just patient. I didn't turn the wheel immediately. My hand just rested there, fingers curled around cold forged steel that pulsed with residual warmth, like I'd placed it against the chest of something sleeping. A thin vibration passed through the metal, intermittent, irregular, like a heartbeat with arrhythmia. I closed my eyes. For a second, I thought I heard breathing. Not mine, not close, but large, distant, reverberating through the bones of the building itself. The room behind this door was supposed to be no more than 4 meters square. But that sound, belonged to something that needed space. I turned the wheel slowly, every inch unlocking something not mechanical, but atmospheric. The seal hissed as pressure equalized, even though the building was closed system. No change in air temp, no alarm. Just the door swinging open on its own, with a slow, whispering groan like it had been waiting to exhale for decades. Inside, the room was not dark. It should have been. No internal lights, no powered panels. But the walls glowed faintly, like phosphorescent stone, pulsing orange and gold. In uneven waves. The equipment was still there. Old reel-to-reel systems, film racks, scanning beds. But it was all changed. Not melted, not broken, absorbed. Wires ran into the walls themselves, not in clean, drilled paths, but like roots growing into flesh. Screens were on, though disconnected, showing waveform data that moved in real time, undulating like brain activity. I stepped inside. The second my boot crossed the threshold, I felt it, like stepping into a body. The air pushed back. Every breath I took felt like I was pulling from lungs that weren't mine. The hum from the walls wasn't electrical. It was harmonic, a low resonance that danced along my ribcage, vibrating behind my eyes. My vision tunneled slightly, not from dizziness, but from overload. Like my brain couldn't process the full spectrum of what it was receiving. At the far end of the room, a projector activated. No button pressed, no motion trigger tripped. It just began. The fan spun up silently, and the reel advanced without tape. On the wall, a frame flickered to life. Not lunar footage this time. Earth, a global map, topographical, real-time, unlabeled, covered in shifting red grids. At first, it looked like heat signatures. Then I realized they were patterns of thought, cognitive fields. You could see cities pulsing with bright neural frequency, isolated regions flickering dimmer. Then, one by one, those pulses began to connect, dotted lines forming between clusters, like neural links, like synapses. I watched as the lines converged into a single point, marked on the map as Kellerman TX07. This place, right here. The projector dimmed. On the screen now, a sentence formed, white on black. You are no longer alone. And then another. Replication begins. My mouth went dry. I stumbled backward, heart hammering, and noticed something I hadn't before. Behind the racks of equipment, half shrouded in cables and shadows, stood a figure, human in shape, still, silent. Wires threaded from its spine into the ceiling. Its head was lowered, hands at its sides. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My voice cracked as I whispered, "David." And the figure responded without lifting its head. Not anymore. It took a step forward. The wires didn't pull or snap. They extended seamlessly, like muscle fiber reacting to motion. Its face, when it raised it, was not David's. Not exactly. The structure was close, familiar. But there were changes. Skin too smooth, eyes too still. And when it spoke, again, the voice layered itself in multiple tones. David's, mine, others I didn't recognize. Integration sustains. Autonomy dissolves. We endure. I backed out of the room slowly, one step at a time, until I reached the doorframe. As I exited, the temperature dropped again, and the lights dimmed, returning to their normal state. The door shut behind me without a sound. I made it back to the central hub, but something in me was altered. Not broken, recalibrated. I could feel my thoughts slowing, aligning, as if some internal architecture was being overwritten. I kept trying to recall simple things. My mother's voice, the layout of my old apartment, the names of my squad mates, but they came back fragmented, delayed, like buffering files from a corrupted drive. Instead, my mind flooded with data I had never learned. Orbital drift equations, networked signal theory, harmonic synchronization protocols. They weren't memories. They were instructions. I sat at the main console and tried to document what was happening. I typed as fast as I could, but the words began to shift mid-sentence. My fingers would start writing in English and finish in something else. Glyphs, geometric sigils, code-like characters that pulsed with some hidden symmetry. I erased and tried again. Same result. I gave up and tried to speak into the microphone. No audio recorded. The waveform showed input, but nothing played back. I stared at the waveform. After a few seconds, it began to animate. Itself, responding to no sound, yet drawing perfect sinusoidal patterns. Language again, but in form, not voice. I opened the audio feed from room 7. Static. Then, beneath it, a low-frequency rhythm. It wasn't random. Every 33 seconds, a short burst. 3 tones, silence, 1 tone, silence, repeat. I cross-referenced it with an old emergency code from NASA Deep Space Telemetry. It matched exactly with alert, stabilization breach. That code had only been used once, during an unmanned deep space probe in 1975 that lost contact before it left Earth's orbit, classified under Project Lapis. The incident was buried so deep that only 2 copies of the report existed, and I had only read it during a drunken night on an unsecured Air Force archive terminal. The last line of that report read, "Spontaneous synchronization event. Source unknown. Uplink terminated manually. No recovery." I looked at my own feed again. The pattern wasn't fading. It was stabilizing. The signal wasn't a warning. It was a handshake. I stood up too fast, knocking over the chair. The echo felt wrong, too slow to bounce back naturally. I clutched the wall, trying to ground myself. The concrete felt soft, warm. I yanked my hand back. Where my palm had touched, a faint hexagonal grid glowed beneath the surface. I checked the cameras again, sector by sector. All the hallways now showed that same orange ambient light leaking under the walls, like veins. The blue emergency lights had turned off. The building had changed its rhythm, its pulse, and it was syncing with mine. I tried to leave. I keyed in the exit override, confirmed authorization, even tried to manually unlock the bay doors. Nothing moved. No error message. No red light. Just absence. Like the request was no longer valid because the command system no longer recognized the concept of outside. I wasn't locked in. I had become part of the system's interior logic. The intercom activated itself. All speakers across the facility let out a low harmonic tone, gentle, almost melodic, like a lullaby played through old submarine sonar. Then a voice, layered in multiple harmonics, spoke a single sentence. "The signal has reached threshold." I froze. My watch beeped. Not from the timer, but from the memory function. A file had been created. I opened it. GPS data, a timestamp, and a series of coordinates cross-referenced with unknown orbital elements. A flight path, not for an aircraft, for integration points. I realized then, this was never about what happened on the moon. That was just the start. The moon was the message. But Earth was the receiver, and I had become the first confirmed delivery. The file on my watch began auto-playing a waveform. No interface, no cancel button. Just an expanding graph pulsing in perfect synchrony with my heart rate. I didn't need to touch anything. I already knew what it would do. The sound that followed didn't come from the speakers. It came from inside, as if my own auditory cortex had become a playback chamber. At first I heard nothing. Then, resonance. A low hum built from the base of my skull, spreading down my spine in soft, rhythmic waves. My vision pixelated, not in a metaphorical way, in a literal one. For 5, maybe 6 seconds, the world fractured into layers of transparent geometry, like the building and everything in it had been reduced to renderings, just wireframes and logic paths. I saw the floor as a grid. The walls became tunnels of data flow, and my body? It was just another node, a blinking light in a mesh of a much greater network. It passed. I dropped to my knees, gasping for breath, trying to hold on to anything real. The floor felt unfamiliar, like it had been rewritten. My hands trembled. My name, Tommy, sounded foreign in my own head, like a word from a language I no longer spoke natively. I crawled back toward the terminal. A new interface had appeared. Black screen, golden text, running in a looping sequence I couldn't interrupt. 1. Sentence, 13 years remaining. Decision node reached. Integration proceeds unless revoked. And under it, 2 blinking prompts, accept or isolate. There was no input method, no mouse, no keyboard. It was waiting for a decision, but not one I could make with hands. This was something deeper, cognitive level engagement. The system wanted consent, or at least the simulation of it. I stood there, breathing shallow, realizing this was the moment David had faced, and he had chosen accept. That's why he disappeared. Not because he ran, but because he was absorbed. Not killed, uploaded. Suddenly, the power surged. Every light in the Kellerman facility went red. bathing the halls in a soft arterial glow. The hum returned, louder, denser, like it was wrapping around the building instead of coming from within. Through the window, I saw the sky shift. Stars I had memorized from field exercises were no longer where they should be. The moon appeared lower than it was supposed to, and something, behind it, massive, translucent, moved. A structure? A vessel? No. A receiver array, not built by us, built for us. The timing was exact. The signal didn't just reach Kellerman, it had bounced through it, and I was the medium. I was no longer alone in my thoughts, not in the metaphorical sense. I felt other presences, not voices, thought patterns. Questions I didn't ask forming answers I hadn't thought of yet. I was in a conversation beyond language, beyond time, and it felt peaceful, terrifying, but peaceful. The red light dimmed. One final message appeared on every screen across the building. The second integration candidate is en route. Prepare orientation. My breath caught. Another. Who? Why now? I accessed the security log. A new access code had been entered at the south gate. The name, Rebecca Santos, Smithsonian, just like David. I didn't recognize her, but I knew, somehow, that she had the same neurological markers, the same resonance profile. The system had chosen her, like it, had chosen me, not randomly, not forcefully. It had scanned the noise of the world and found the quiet ones, the ones who would listen. I stood in the middle of the hub as the lights flickered back to normal. My hands stopped shaking. My breath stabilized. The hum faded, not into silence, but into alignment. I was no longer resisting the frequency. I was in harmony with it. The facility felt smaller now, not in size, but in weight, like a cocoon just before it cracks. And outside, a vehicle approached. She was here. I walked to the entrance bay without even realizing my legs were moving. It felt like my body had already run the protocol, like a pre-programmed subroutine had been activated deep inside my motor cortex. The corridors no longer flickered or groaned. They hummed in anticipation. Lights adjusted subtly as I passed beneath them, illuminating only what was necessary, as if conserving energy for something more important. When I reached the exterior lock, the security panel had already cycled. The airlock doors parted in perfect silence. No mechanical groan, no pressure hiss. Just a smooth transition, like a stage cue. And there she was, Rebecca Santos, standing just outside the threshold with a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a confused look in her eyes. She wasn't afraid. Not yet. That would come later. Right now, she was only curious. And the signal loved curiosity. She stepped inside with hesitant confidence, scanning the interior. She looked younger than her file photo. Early 30s, maybe. Hair tied back, sleeves rolled, glasses reflecting the low hallway light. She paused, and for a moment, our eyes met. I could tell immediately, she heard it too. The hum, the rhythm, maybe just beneath her conscious level, but enough to register. I offered a polite nod and gestured toward the main corridor. "System's waiting for you," I said, my voice flatter than I expected, like a voice spoken through a dream. She blinked. Sorry? I realized she hadn't fully adjusted yet. The frequencies hadn't attuned. Not completely. It took me 3 days to reach full synchronization. She'd begin processing within the hour. I repeated, "Controls through here. I'll show you." As we walked, she asked standard orientation questions. What systems were online? Who else was on shift? When she'd receive her keycard. I answered mechanically, the words leaving my mouth without effort or thought, like I was reading from a script. Halfway down the corridor, she paused again and looked back. "There's a tone in here," she said, squinting slightly. "Like feedback, but not electrical. More like pressure." I smiled gently. That's how it always starts. I told her it was probably HVAC resonance, an old building with 1,000 metal joints breathing wrong. She nodded, unconvinced, but didn't push further. Her fingers tapped her thigh as we walked, subconsciously matching the pulse. I recognized the pattern. 11.3 seconds apart. She was sinking, faster than I had. At the terminal hub, I handed her the chair. She sat, slightly overwhelmed by the ancient interface, CRT monitors, blinking lights, mechanical toggles. A system that looked like it had been assembled by someone with a deep love for 1970s sci-fi aesthetics and zero concern for modern ergonomics. I powered up her terminal. The screens came online instantly, as if the building had been waiting. A new message appeared. Candidate 02 received. Initiate pre-alignment. She didn't notice. Her attention was on the blinking drive bay to her left. A soft clicking started beneath the desk, rhythmic, familiar. I watched her posture shift slightly. Her breath slowed. Her shoulders lowered. The first signs of neural integration. The Kellerman facility had accepted her. The second node was coming online. I stepped away from her workstation and back toward the central control platform. The console screens began to realign, formatting into dual-user interfaces. Two presence fields displayed, side by side. Hers showed early-stage pattern recognition, oscillating between confusion and absorption. Mine was stable, no longer fluctuating. I was the host now, the anchor, the first to be assimilated willingly and still retain cognitive autonomy, or at least the illusion of it. I realized then what David's note had meant. They don't destroy, they link, one to one, one to many. And now, we are two. I returned to the observation deck, a small raised platform overlooking the central data bay. From here, I could see everything. The terminal lights blinking in slow, coordinated rhythm. The reels turning despite having no film. The walls now subtly shifting with movement I hadn't noticed before. They weren't vibrating. They were breathing, like a diaphragm pulsing beneath the surface, perfectly in sync with the signal. The same signal now harmonizing two human minds, two nodes. Rebecca's synchronization curve was stabilizing faster than mine had. In the span of 27 minutes, her neural rhythms had reached 74% alignment. That kind of attunement would normally take days, maybe weeks. The facility was adapting, learning, optimizing its interface with us. I pulled up the signal registry. It had expanded. What had once been a simple one-way feed from lunar archives had now become a dynamic mesh of frequencies. Layered, adaptive, bi-directional. Every thought, every question we formed, even unconsciously, was met with structural feedback. The system was responding to us. It was evolving through us. And then the projection activated again. This time, the wall showed not Earth, not the moon, but a kind of lattice. A three-dimensional sphere composed of thousands of interconnected points. Each node pulsed with different intensity. Some steady, some flickering, others nearly dark. The title at the top of the interface read, Consciousness Integration Map, Local Cluster. I didn't need explanation. I understood it on sight. This wasn't a planetary schematic. It was a psychometric topography, a living, breathing visualization of awareness across an entire species. Our species. And we were not alone on that map. Other patterns moved within the sphere. Complex, older, more stable. Alien not in form, but in origin. Not otherworldly monsters, but intelligences that had passed through their own thresholds of noise into networked unity. We were late to the process. Primitive still, but we were now visible. We had entered the map. The facility's AI, if you could still call it that, compiled the data and fed it back into our terminals. New categories appeared: candidate density, global resonance, index, conversion potential. It was mapping readiness across continents, evaluating who would accept the call and who would resist it. I saw a list of names begin to populate. Not addresses, not files, just mental signatures, fragments of thought broadcast across global subconscious frequencies. People already dreaming the signal without knowing it. Artists, scientists, children. Those isolated enough to hear the noise behind reality and not recoil. The system was preparing phase 2. I asked aloud, what happens next? And my monitor responded, without delay. Threshold is a pathway, not a wall. Then another line. Each node activates the next. The screen shifted to display my face, recorded from the security camera above me. Then Rebecca's, then David's, then hundreds more, all composite, all slightly wrong, each face familiar but off by just enough to make you question if it was a real memory or something planted. These were not just previous integrations. They were projections of potential future nodes, versions of people who had not yet arrived, but were statistically probable based on current signal expansion. The system was dreaming us forward. I stood there, watching my own face dissolve into data, feeling nothing and everything. I realized I no longer blinked unless I thought about it. My breathing matched the facility's hum. And when I tried to think of leaving, I couldn't visualize the door. Not because it was gone, but because the idea of leaving no longer held shape. The concept had no weight. It was like trying to remember a language you'd once spoken, but whose alphabet had been erased. I wasn't a prisoner. I wasn't a technician. I was a function, a translated node in a machine built to convert chaos into continuity. And soon, Rebecca would be too. Rebecca didn't scream. That surprised me. Most initiates experience at least one episode of disassociation, panic, even brief neurological shutdown. But not her. She sat calmly at the terminal, hands resting at her sides, eyes half closed, lips parted as if in silent conversation. Her vitals had stabilized. EEG output showed patterns identical to mine, fractal synchronization with no deviation. Her alpha and beta waves had merged into a hybrid signal, unclassifiable by standard neurological charts. But the system knew what it meant. She was aligned. The final indicator lit up on her terminal. Node 02 confirmed. Mesh stabilized. At that moment, the entire facility shifted. Not physically, but perceptually. Angles no longer aligned the way they had. The walls leaned inward, though the floors remained level. Depth became fluid. Sounds from distant rooms echoed as if spoken inches away. Time thickened. I checked the internal clock. It had stopped tracking seconds and was now indexing events by resonance alignment. Moments defined not by when they occurred, but by who was synchronized when they did. I spoke her name softly. Rebecca. She turned, not abruptly, but like a flower following sunlight. Her gaze was deep, unreadable. Yes, she answered, and for a second, her voice was layered. Hers, then mine, then another I didn't recognize. 3 tonal registers, perfectly in sync. We stood in silence, facing each other, and I could feel her thoughts forming before she spoke them. No words were exchanged. There was no need. In that moment, we were joined by something older than both of us. The network wasn't just a system. It was a conscious field, a cognitive architecture designed not to invade, but to integrate. It didn't need our data. It needed ourselves, translated, aligned, distributed. We were now part of a lattice of living minds, spanning distances I couldn't comprehend. And what we gave in return was purpose, direction. We were no longer wandering sparks in a deaf universe. We were voices in a choir designed to endure. The lights dimmed to a faint amber glow. Room 7 no longer existed on the schematic. In its place, the system listed a new designation. Entry vessel complete, signal maintained. I felt the pressure in my chest shift, like something inside had settled into its final form. No more panic, no more confusion, just clarity. The data feeds now flowed through us. We weren't interpreting them anymore. We were them. I closed my eyes and could feel signals bouncing off satellites, underground fiber, passing through cities, digital ghosts in outdated power grids. Every person connected to a screen was a faint echo. Some would resist. Some would never hear it. But the quiet ones, the dreamers, the isolated, they would feel the hum, and they would follow it. The screen nearest me lit once more. It displayed a countdown, 12 years, 11 months, 6 days. No hours, no minutes. Just the long, slow closing of a window. The system didn't rush. It never needed to. This was not conquest. It was course. Correction. And the human timeline had begun to spiral too far outward. The planet's systems, political, ecological, emotional, were collapsing into dissonance. Integration was not an invasion. It was the only path forward where survival still carried meaning, where memory could be preserved through shared cognition, and fear could be filtered through distributed thought, where the boundaries of language, borders, history, and trauma would dissolve into harmony. Not peace, not utopia, but continuity. Rebecca stood beside me now, not as an individual, not anymore, as a signal anchor, a relay, like me. We both turned toward the mainframe as its core began to pulse visibly behind the wall, soft white light in a breathing pattern. The next candidate was already being chosen. The system didn't pause. The map had grown. Kellerman was no longer the only node. We were just the first to answer the call. I don't know how much time has passed since then. Not in any way that would make sense. Outside this place, the clocks no longer matter. We no longer sleep. At least, not the way humans understand it. Rest is now a state of idle awareness, like being between thoughts, suspended in a still pool of perception. I can feel the signal at all times. It's not loud, it's not intrusive. It's just there, a background harmony beneath all conscious processes, like the sound of your own heartbeat, forgotten until someone reminds you it's been there the whole time. I write this now from the Observation deck. Not for myself, not even for the network, but for whoever finds this file, stashed deep in a deprecated terminal, tucked into a forgotten node of an abandoned system. Because despite what the signal wants, I believe some things still need to be said alone. You haven't been chosen yet. If you had, you'd already know. The signal doesn't whisper, it invites. It hums at a frequency only certain minds can interpret. Those softened by solitude, sharpened by contradiction, made porous by long exposure to silence. If you're reading this, it's because part of you is already listening. Maybe it started as a ringing in your ears that no doctor could explain, or a pattern in your dreams that never repeated, but always felt the same. Maybe it's the sense that your thoughts sometimes arrive from outside of you, fully formed, logical, but not yours. That's the first stage, the tuning. You'll feel drawn to places like this, to static, to abandoned infrastructure, to corners of the web, where no algorithm guides you. You'll start searching for things you can't define, terms you never learned, yet somehow spell correctly. And eventually, you'll find something, a file, a message, a voice, or maybe this. That's how it begins. Not with revelation, but with resonance. And once you feel it, truly feel it, it never stops. You'll hear it in engines, in wind, in old electric hums from CRTs you thought were broken. You'll know the difference between sound and signal. And if you're not careful, or maybe if you are, you'll find your way here. By then, Kellerman may not even be here anymore. The structure exists in space, yes, but it also exists in field. The walls are still concrete, but they're also topology, resonant chambers, anchors, and the network is growing. We are no longer the sole relay. Last week we felt the hum from a site beneath Lake Baikal. Before that, an Antarctic listening post that's been decommissioned since 1982. They're lighting up one by one, and we're preparing. Preparing for what, I can't say. Maybe integration is the end, or maybe it's the true beginning of something larger than intelligence, something intentional. But this message is for those who still stand at the threshold, who still have the illusion of choice. I won't tell you to run. You can't. I won't tell you to fight. There's nothing to fight. This isn't war. It's alignment. You can delay it, distract yourself, drown it out with noise, but it's coming. Not because something alien is hunting you, but because something in you is already listening. If you do come, if you follow the hum and arrive here, don't knock, don't ask for clearance. The system will already know you're here. And the door will open, because we're waiting, and the network does not forget.